You're listening to Two Bobs, conversations on the art of creative entrepreneurship with David C. Baker and Blair Enns.
Well, it's my turn to kind of pick your brain today, and I want to talk about your recent experience in writing. You did an experiment last year and did some analysis. I read about your analysis. Tell me about that. Give me a summary of what you did, and then I've got a bunch of tough questions that are going to make you squirm. Not really, but they are tough questions. So give us for somebody that hasn't been reading, give us an overview of what happened.
Yeah, so I launched Win Without Pitching about 14 years ago, and when I launched it, I went about lead generation the only way I knew how, and that was just start writing. So I wrote a book that was self-published, and I committed to writing an article a month at average length of about 1,200 words, and I did that for a long time. And then in 2010. So I was at this pace of 1,200 words a month for many years. And then in 2010, about almost 10 years in, I published through your publishing company, Rockbench, the Win Without Pitching Manifesto. And I gave the manifesto, it's still available on winwithoutpitching.com. You can
That was our first book, by the way.
Yeah, it was.
And it pisses me off because it sells better than mine. But go ahead.
Thank you for mentioning that. Blair 1, David 0. So when that book came out, I kind of I put it out there for free on the website as a bunch of content. It's 24,000 words, so it's a fairly small book. And but I thought, okay, I'm going to take a little content vacation, and so my frequency of writing dropped. And I mentioned this in the article. I forget what the numbers and what the dates were, but there were a couple of years where I only published 4 articles a year.
5,000 words, you said, for 2011, and then again in 2012, 5,000 words each year.
Yeah, and then I realized I'd gotten into this. The vacation turned into kind of, what's beyond a vacation is a sabbatical, and then I was just in this rut. So, business was still going in the right direction. Kind of, I was doing a lot of speaking, and obviously the book carried me, but I could see the web traffic going down, and I just decided at the beginning of 2015 that I would try to publish every week. So I'd go from I think it was the year before in 2014. I think I had published 6 times. So I was trying to go to 50, from 6 to 52 at the same word count. And in the end, I think I published 36 new pieces of my content over the year. And I forget what the math was on that, but it was a significant amount of words.
Yeah, 45,000 words.
And it was a really interesting experiment. I learned some lessons. I wrote about that. And since I wrote that article, I think a month or so ago, 6 weeks ago maybe, I don't know. I've even learned more from there. So I'm so glad I did it. I'm really glad I did it. It was just one of the most worthwhile experiments I've ever done.
Are you going to tweak the goal for 2016? So you wrote 36 times for 45,000 words, so about, looks like 1,200 words on average. Is that what are you going to change for 2016 in terms of quantity and length? Well,
this is fairly new. Like in the last 10 days or so, I've realized that I'm on a bit of a content treadmill, and this talk is probably going to bleed into role. Like what is it that I should be doing? Because I realized, my job is to think and write primarily. I'm trying to create space in my business so I can think more and write more. And I've just did some math before this, and I realized if you count up my content obligations today, if I continue to write an article a week at 1,200 words and the other things I do, I'm producing 35,000 words of content a month.
Wow.
And it's unsustainable. I have, so I'll just do the quick math here. So at an article a week at 1,200 words, it's 4,800 per month. I do a webcast every month, and I have for almost 10 years now. And I don't write all these words, but when you take the transcript afterwards, it's about 9,000 words.
That's for an hour?
Yeah.
Webcast, okay.
Yeah. And then on average, I deliver a speech a month of some kind. And that's another 9,000 words. And both of those are cheating a little bit because a speech, it's rare that I'll do a whole new topic in a speech. So that's a little bit of cheating. And a webcast doesn't take me, it doesn't take me as long to write an article. My article I published last week was 2,000 words, and it took me between 14 and 16 hours to write. So that's a significant part of my week. So it doesn't the webcasts are far more efficient in terms of writing time because I don't write them like you wouldn't write out your webcast. Like you don't write out a speech.
Right.
You outline it and you think through the points that you want to make, and then you speak to those points. So it's not like writing. But I also do every week now, I do a weekly focus call, which is a 20-minute conference call for everybody in the Win Without Pitching program. So a bunch of firms attend live, and then some of them listen to the recording later. So I just take one principle about selling, and I talk about that, and have our clients try to focus on that for the week. So that's about 2,500 words a week times 4. And then I'm also producing content for our training program at a pace of one module, about 3,000 words. It's probably a little bit more than 3,000 words every 3 weeks. So about 4,000 words per month. And all of that adds up to about 35,000 words a month. And it is...
which is 1.5 times your first book.
Yeah, every month. So it is... I've come to the realization that it's unsustainable. And then on top of that, I have 2 book projects that I'm actively working on, and I've hired somebody to help me with those book projects. And I realize those 2 books that's where I'm creating transformational value. Those are the, you can look at these other things that I do, and there's various levels of kind of importance and obligation, like the training modules, a new training module every 3 weeks. That's our entire system, our entire business and delivery mechanism is built around that. So that can't go away. But the other things, the things that are going to have the biggest impact on the largest number of people and the biggest impact on our business, it's going to be those 2 books. So right now, I've committed to these 2 books. I'm working with people on them. But all this other content's getting in the way. So
you did all this writing in the last year, 2015. At what point? When was the anniversary when you switched from consulting to a training organization? When did that occur?
Began in the beginning of. Started adding training in 2014, and it was at the beginning of 2013, and I think it was the beginning 1 year later. Maybe it was the beginning of 2015.
I'm just wondering what the correlation is there. Like, did one lead to the other? Like, you'd made the decision to be a training organization, and then you committed to doing the writing, partly because that required it. You had to be producing so much content, but also probably because you really needed to stay in regular touch with prospects, and this would be the logical way to do it. Was there a connection there? Yeah,
I hadn't thought about it, but I think there is a connection because timing-wise, I decided in late October or early November of 2014 that I was going to drop consulting. So I was on a plane flying to work with a client, and I decided this is my last client. And I walked into the room and said, "You're my last client." Mm-hmm. I do these things. I make these public proclamations, and that's a way of forcing myself to kind of do what I think I should do. And then I went home and wrote a 3,000-word article about it, saying to the world, I'm out of the consulting business. And then it was shortly after that, it was a month or two after that or even just a matter of weeks, where I decided I was going to write more. And so clearly I still travel a bit, and most of my travel has to do with public speaking now and not consulting. So it has freed up some time. But on the other hand, as you know, airline travel, that's great writing time.
Oh, I've taken trips just to write, where they call them mileage runs too, where you're near the end of a calendar year and you need to get a few more segments or something, and you also need to get some time away. So I've flown to LA 3 times now, round trip, and get right on the plane and come back. One of the things that we've talked about with clients that we share that are getting ready to embark on some writing venture, is like a book typically, is this idea of whether they should use a ghostwriter or not. And both of us have said, maybe we phrased it differently, but both of us have said to those clients, no, because it's, you get smarter in the writing. And for one thing, the ghostwriter is never going to be as intelligent, but mainly it's that you won't become more intelligent if somebody else does this writing. So, and that coupled, what drives people to even think about using a ghostwriter is because they don't feel comfortable writing. And you're an unlikely writer by your own admission, in that you've gotten good at it, but it's taken work and it didn't come naturally until more recently. Have you gotten smarter at a faster pace during 2015 than you did in the past because of the writing?
Oh, without question. There's nothing I value more than learning and growth. Nothing. I just think that's why we're here, to learn and to grow. And yeah, I can look back at some of the years where I was busiest, like 2012, when I was so busy. But I don't know what I liked. I didn't. My personal balance sheet didn't grow in terms of what I knew.
Knowledge,
yeah. And a great example of this, of what you just said about how important it is to write. I did a webcast on last Thursday, and I did it from my hotel room on the road. It was one of my many. I was traveling to do a speech. I did a weekly focus call. I published an article that took me almost 16 hours to write. Then I did a webcast. I did a speech, and then I did a webcast from my hotel room, all on the road, all within a period of 4 days. So that was a lot of content I was responsible for. And the last thing chronologically I had in the week on the Thursday morning was to write and deliver this webcast, and I delivered it Thursday morning. And it was one of those topics, and they're not all like this, but it was a topic where the reason I chose the topic was because I didn't know anything about it.
Right.
Or it's not that I didn't know anything about it. I had a problem in this area, so I committed to doing the webcast on the topic. And then I thought, okay, now I've committed publicly. People are paying me money to sit in this webcast. I had better figure out this problem. And I didn't have the problem figured out until the night before. And I didn't have the webcast written until I started writing it 3 hours before. And
I call that diving into an empty pool and venting water on the way down.
Yeah, and I've heard you say that. I
feels.
think it's a great line, and that's not how it felt in this. My brain was working on it subconsciously, and I had enlisted the help of some of my team members and some of the coaching staff. I was just happening to have dinner with my entire coaching staff the night before, and so we worked on the problem together. In fact, one of them pulled out an iPad Pro and a pencil and was just sketching the whole time. And by the time we were done, it was like, wow, I could see the problem. I broke the problem down into 3 different categories, and not just we did this as a team. First time I'd done this. And it was just clear the way of thinking about solutions was just so obvious. So, it's a great example of, if I decided I can't do a webcast on that topic because I can't think about the problem clearly, and I don't know what the solutions are, then I never would have done it. I chose the webcast because I knew I chose it because I was having a problem in this area. I knew my clients were having a problem in this area. I knew that within me somewhere I had the answer. It's not a complicated topic, but it's just something that had been tripping me up. And it was just something clearly I hadn't thought kind of clearly and in an organized manner, logically, long enough about the problem. So by committing to the topic, I forced myself to solve the problem. And therefore, by midday Thursday, I'm smarter than I was Wednesday.
You're listening to Two Bobs, conversations on the art of creative entrepreneurship. Your hosts are David C. Baker of Recourses, author, speaker, and advisor to owners of expert firms, and Blair Enns of Win Without Pitching, the sales training and coaching program for creative entrepreneurs. For more information, go to twobobs.com. If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by telling a friend and rating us on iTunes. Thank you. Now back to David and Blair.
So I started consulting in 94, and I remember in 99, it just hit me that I was being asked similar questions repeatedly, and I didn't have a clear point of view. I was like hem-hawing around, stumbling. I just didn't have a defendable point of view on certain topics. So I just got tired of it because I just hate incompetence. Incompetence just really drives me to solve it competently. And so I just wrote down all the topics that I felt like I needed a point of view on. And it came out to 55 topics, scary number. And so the next thought was, okay, well, how am I going to ever develop a competent point of view on these? And that's when I decided to start persuading that publication. So it was 6 pages a month, and it was $360 a year. It was almost the same sort of rationale for your webcast thing. You need to solve it, so this is a good opportunity to do it. And I like you, I was thinking, once I solve this, I'll tweak my point of view over time, but I'll have something to think about. I will have leapt over this barrier. And so I wrote 55 issues of persuading, and then I quit the publication. Now, since then, I've had to develop points of view on lots of other things, but it's really helpful. Those issues were 3,400 words. You've been writing 1,200 words, and I never would have said this back then, or maybe even until recently, but 1,200 words almost seems... Do you think 2 years from now, 1,200 words will be the right number for you, or do you think it'll be shorter?
I think 1,200 has been the average for me over 14 years.
So it's not likely to change.
It's not likely to change. My best work is usually around 2,000 words.
Okay.
And you can write every once in a while. You need to write something. I believe I feel like I need to write something that's more digestible. Some short ones, some short kind of
right.
Lively ones that get people thinking, almost like it's for a different audience. But I feel like I need to, like anybody can fake anything for 400 words, probably 600 words, maybe 750 words. It's like when you go over 900 words, you kind of have to know what you're talking about. I can still fake my way through a topic up to about 1,000 words. But if you've got, 1,200, 1,300 of like edited down, to the essence, you get rid of the extraneous stuff, which is sometimes difficult for me. But if you've got 1,200 or 1,300 well-edited words, you have to know what you're talking about, or you're going to lose your audience.
When you look at what the Win Without Pitching book did for your consulting business, which was 23,056 words. When you look at what that did for your business, would you have been better off last year to have taken half of what you wrote, put it towards another book, and then left the remaining portion in the regular blogs?
I don't think about it that way last year because I have the seeds of various book projects that every once in a while I pick one up and work on it, and then I put it down thinking, this isn't right. This doesn't feel right. So I've always been working on the next book, and it's only in the last 6 months, maybe a little bit longer, where I've basically been fully committed to 2 different projects to the point where I've hired somebody to help, and I'm actually collaborating with a co-author on another one. So I'm completely committed to these. And I think without that complete commitment to the project, no. Like if I'd had the complete commitment, it would have made sense to channel my writing into the book projects.
Okay.
But I have absolutely no regret. I'm so glad I did. I learned a lot. I learned that I've gotten faster as a writer. Now, you wouldn't know that by me saying it took me between 14 and 16 hours to write this 2,000 word article. This one took a long time, and I also read 3 books, but there are different ways to read books. I read 3 books over 4 days, and I'm not counting the book reading time to write it. But in one of the books, it's a book I'd read before, and another book is a book that summarizes the body of work of some economists that I've read their books. So a lot of it was fairly quick reading, highlighting, pulling stuff out. But that aside, that's kind of an anomaly where I don't put that much time into a weekly article. That aside, I've become a much faster writer. I can write 1,200 words in, as few as 4 hours. And I mentioned in this article I wrote about the experiment that, I conducted an experiment or a survey with friends of mine who are writers, and including you. And I asked, how long does it take you to write 2,000 words? I think it was 2,000 words. And I was really surprised at how quickly people wrote. I think you said like 45 minutes or some crazy thing. And my answer was 16 hours. The average answer was 2 hours. I thought, okay, I'm 8 times slower than all of these people whose work I really admire.
But that's one thing that's changed over the last year is that you're writing faster than you did before.
Yeah, way faster. And then every once in a while, just like there's different ways to read a book, and some you kind of you savor every word and every sentence, and some you just kind of speed read and highlight. You write the same way too. Some you can just bang off, and some require a deeper type of writing.
So last year, my intent was to write a new piece of insight every month. As it turned out, I didn't. It was actually like 8 times instead of 12 times, and they averaged about 800 words. And then, of course, I'm not including the speeches and some other stuff, but in terms of like fresh new content through my email blast. This year, I'm trying another experiment, motivated by a couple things, and that's that I'm writing twice a week, so 8 to 10 times as frequently, but shorter. So I'm writing about 500 to 600 words. I'm either publishing it on Monday and Thursday or Tuesday and Friday. And one of my fears was that I'd run out of things that I really thought were worth writing about.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been the case at all. I've actually found that my net list of unwritten topics is growing. I don't know. I'd be interested to know how you answer this, but when I come up with most of my topics, it's when I'm either on the phone with a client or in person with a client talking, and just some idea hits me. It's like, oh, dang, that would be a great topic, and I just jot it down. So the question is, what's the setting when you most frequently get good ideas for topics?
The big one is when I'm writing. So the mistake is the more you write, the more ideas you get. Like we're doing this podcast, and every once in a while we kind of think, oh, that would make another interesting podcast. If you don't write that down, if you don't capture it, there's probably a greater than 50% chance that it's gone. So I use Evernote, and I just have lists of topic ideas.
That's what I have too. I've got 170 some topic ideas right now in Evernote. And then I have a little red book that's about the size of a 305 card that I have on the table next to me with a special pen, oddly enough. I sound like the guy in As Good as It Gets, but a special pen. And whenever I have a topic idea, I write it down. And the client doesn't know that's what I'm doing. They think I'm taking notes that I'm going to expand on later. But yeah, because I missed that. So let's say that one of the, say, 250,000 people listening to this podcast, try not to snicker. No, don't snicker. They're listening to this and they're saying, well, I don't, and they're an undifferentiated firm. Talk about the struggle you would have or they might have if they were trying to generate this level and frequency and depth of insight, if they were an undifferentiated firm. Like, what do you write about?
I can't imagine. Like, does the world really need another article on branding or book on branding? Like, really? So, first of all, it's easier to write. It's a bit of a contradiction, but it's easier to write when you have a narrow focus. They're like crevasses or niches, as we say in Canada, where it's like you crawl in through this crack and you think it's a tiny world, and then just it opens up into Narnia. It's just this massive place with all these nooks and crannies, all these different places that you can go and explore. So first you have to get through that kind of fear of narrowing. And then it becomes easy. And the key is to go very narrow in your subject matter and deep. And then, I've talked about this before, but probably the most important thing is to have a perspective. You need to have a point of view on this stuff. You can't just do a book of lists or an article of lists of here are the things that you should do. It's I'm sure you do this too. I think you just wrote about this recently, but you need to be able to, if you or I read our clients' stuff, we would need to be able to, you want to be able to put it in kind of the sea of the competition and pick it out and read somebody's and go, I know who that is because I recognize their voice.
Yep.
So that's the importance of perspective. I always say adding perspective is like going through puberty. Your voice changes, right? Your voice changes. So it's you need to have a point of view. I have very little sense of obligation to be right in my thinking. It's not my job to be right.
Yeah, I noticed that actually. You don't seem burdened by that at all.
David won, Blair won. No, it's not my job to be right. I'm in the courage business. I'm in the empowerment business. It's my job to give people the courage to take action. It's my job to provoke and to get people to think about things differently. I'm fighting tired, horrible, ridiculous conventions, right? When it comes to selling creative services.
Oh yeah.
And so it's my job to shatter conventions, to get people to think differently, to give them the courage to try something different. It's not like I'm comfortable being wrong. It's not about being right or wrong. It's really about having a point of view and thinking, provoking my audience to think about things differently. So I can list here the 10 things that you should do in situation X. But if 8 of those aren't things where you thought, whoa, I wasn't expecting that, then I'm not doing my job.
Oh man, it's very inspiring. I appreciate your letting me pick your brain about this. So you just last thing here. You jot your ideas down in Evernote, which it's ubiquitous, right? And you can access it from your phone or your computer or the internet somewhere at a hotel lobby. What do you write in? What application do you write in?
That's changed. I used to write in Evernote. I own Scribner. I've never used it. I bought it with the intent of writing in that. I actually write in Google Docs now.
Okay. Yeah. I write in folding text. It's a really simple,
heard of it.
But yeah, I really like it. And do you ever do any? Do you ever scan your writing for keywords as you're writing? I don't. Some people do. I find that I trust Google to do their job right. I'm just going to write my insight. I'm not going to worry too much about SEO stuff.
Oh, I have somebody in my firm who's in charge of SEO, and we don't play. It's good SEO is pretty straightforward. You just write about what you think. If you're writing for the purpose of SEO, then I think I think it just feels wrong.
It's boring stuff to read.
Just write what you're meant to write. Just channel whatever this magical source is and write what you're meant to write. And then afterwards think, okay, the person who would be interested in this, what would they be typing into Google? And then you frame your key 4 big areas. You make sure there's some not keywords, but you make sure you're using the proper words in those 4 areas of basic SEO.
All right, so let's revisit this a year from now and see what you've learned this year in writing and see how we can take this topic further. Thanks for your insight, Blair.
Deal. Thank you, David.
Thank you for listening to Two Bobs with David C. Baker and Blair Enns. Subscribe and learn more at twobobs.com. That's the number 2, BOBS.com.